Welcome to Mystery Bible. My name is Ken Primus. I am your host. We have been looking at the lineage of Japheth, and the last episode we talked about him. I showed you through all the different notes. We talked about Armenia, we talked about Georgia, we talked about the Anglo-Saxon in England. We talked about all the houses of England that led to Noah. We talked about the houses, the son of Togarmah, Hayek, who started Armenia. We talked about his the statue of Hayek in Armenia. It's there. Britain. We talked from Brutus, who is, as you all know, he broke away from Taurus from the Trojan War, and he is in his lineage. And the houses of Britain, you can track it because Britain is pretty. They're pretty into details. They keep a lot of records, and so you could see from Brutus all the way to Noah. I think that's somewhere about 12 generations there, and it's easy to follow. We talked a little about Denmark and Norway. These are all descendants of Japheth, and that he is part of the European. We talk about Beowulf, and that he is real, even he was born in AD 495. And we talked about France and Germany. Again, these are all the descendants of Japheth. And what we're going to do is continue talking a little more about Japheth again, because like I said, his lineage is all of Europe, and you can actually still go into Armenia and Georgia and places like that and find pictures and statues of a lot of these guys, Togarmah and Hayek and all these men that were mentioned in the Bible, and the book of Jasher and all these other book of Jubilee, and the history of man coming from the time of Noah. I wanted to take some time and talk about Greece, because that is also a part of the Japheth's lineage, and I was going to pick up at that, and we wanted to go through some of the gods of Greece to let you know that they were just mere men and women, and that there is the whole information that is out there about genealogy, as far as astrology and stuff like that, that these are not gods, they are men, and women. We're going to talk about that when we get back. But I wanted to thank you guys for coming. Again, this is Ken Primus at Mystery Bible, and we're going to be right back after this. Welcome back. As you know, that we've been studying the lineage of Japheth, and my hope is not to go in a deep study of it, is just to give you a quick once-over, as they say, a quick glance. And I've mentioned to you some of the writers and books that you can get all of this information from. And my suggestion is that if you choose to go that route, that you grab some of these gentlemen's information and study them, because they did a better job than I can ever do. But what I just wanted to do was just give you guys a quick glance at the lineage of each of the brothers, and we continue to look at Japheth's lineage, and we see one of his sons, Javan. It was the one that settled in Greece, and that actually he gave birth to the Greeks and Romans from his seed. And so we see that in studying the Greek part of the lineage of Japheth, that a lot of the Greek quote unquote gods are simply men and women that had declared that they were gods, Zeus being one of them, Hercules, and all of these guys were did exist, and but they also died. And what I wanted to do is just give you guys a brief intro to it. Again, I'm not trying to go into a deep study, but just basic information so that you can get a handle and to see that the fact is this, that we're all Europeans, they're all family, they're all from one lineage. And the world actually is from a one family that came off of that ark, and we're just looking at the three brothers, and as they began to spread out, what areas they claimed as they moved down from Mount Ararat. I actually got a chance to visit Mount Ararat and close to it, not on the mountain itself, but I was in Armenia, and I got a chance to see that place, and Armenia and Georgia and all those places, Turkey. I got a chance to travel there as well. And these are beautiful, beautiful places and very mountainous. I remember reading and talking to one of the people. They were saying that the reason why they had lived in the mountains was because they were afraid of water, the flood being a part of that declaration, because they experienced the flood, and a lot of the people lived in the mountainous area. And then as time went by, they kind of spread out into different parts of the terrain. But if you go to Georgia and Armenia and Turkey, you'll see that they have beautiful mountainous terrain that is absolutely fantastic. But as we take a look at Javan, we see that his descendants, as I mentioned, they took over. They came and they settled in Greece, and then other sons and his sons actually, as they expanded into different areas, as they began to grow and did whatever they did. But you had one of the princes of the from all these different lineage. His name was Manius, and Manius settled and built 2 cities. He had 2 kids, and a son and a daughter, and Achamonia is his son, and he built a city after his son, and he built one for his daughter as well. He had his son. He had 2 boys that would travel and conquer all over different lands. Akmon and the other is Doris, and they called themselves the Titans as they began to travel and conquer all the different people from different areas. And I know it was Akmon that he had issued people to start calling him the Most High, and he started requiring people to sacrifice and give sacrifice unto him and so forth. And I guess you could call that the birth of the gods in the Greek mythology area. And so as Akmon had a son that his name was Uranus, or he, in the studies, they said that he was a man. He's more science-based. He studied all the different things in the science, and from his lineage is where we get some of the Greek gods and so forth. So he had the story. The history goes is that he had two sons. One is by the name of Titan and Saturn or Cronus, and the Saturn was the older of the brothers, and Titan wanted to rule the kingdom, but he also had a couple of sisters, and that said that Saturn let him be the next ruler. And so these brothers came down to an agreement. Titan said to him, he said, "Look, I'll tell you what. I'll allow you to rule the kingdom under a couple of conditions. One, he says, don't have any male heirs at all. And the second, he says, upon your death, put one of my sons as the ruler." And so this was the deal that these brothers had put together. And but as you know, in that time, in the Greek times, they went to oracles and so forth. And the oracle had actually prophesied that Saturn would have a son that would overthrow his kingdom. And so I know that some of the books and movies that people read and watch and hear about all these different things. But I know Saturn, he had married his wife, Rhea, I think was her name, and they had children, and I know Saturn, he was ruthless in some ways. They say that he had castrated his father so that he wouldn't have any kids and all that type of stuff to come against his kingdom and try to dethrone him or any way, shape, or form. And so, but you know how those guys are. So anyway, you have this family as they began to expand, these two brothers, and you have that Uranus, his province. He actually his province, they say, was from Syria all the way to Africa, where he had control and from the different lands and so forth. And the story goes is that he had a son. His wife became pregnant, Rhea became pregnant, and she disappeared. She went to an island that they had, and because she knew he was killing all of his children, every son that he had, he would sacrifice. And so she took off once she found out she was pregnant, and she hid, and she gave birth to his son Zeus, or Zen, as they call him. And Zeus was the one that later became a god in the mythology of the Greek people. But it was this son that was unknown to him at the time. It's Saturn, and she went and hid his son, and so they named the son Jupiter, and he was raised by a king, and so he was raised by a king as his own son, and so he was the king of Crete, actually. And again, these guys began to sacrifice to gods and so forth, and the name of that king of that time is Melissus, and he appointed his daughter Melissa to be the first priestess, or called the Great Mother. And so later on, this Titan found out about the son, and so he knew that his brother had broke the agreement, and so he took Saturn as a prisoner, and he actually took his wife and put them into a wall. And Jupiter actually he assembled a small army when he heard of this, and went back to Crete to take the kingdom back, restoring his father to the throne. And but his dad knew of just found out about the son, and he remembered about the prophecy that the oracle had said, and so he sent out to start to try to kill his son. And so that is basically some background about Zeus and his family and these brothers. And you see, the world today is just absolutely just families losing their mind against each other. But that story you can read about in some of the history books about Zeus and how he came about and so forth, and the war of the Titans and yeah. But these guys lived and they died and they were buried and so forth. I think you can see that from all the different books and stuff that you have in Europe and in Greece. Hercules is one of the son of Zeus, as we know, and he was known as a young man that had a temper, and how he had to go through his journey. It talks about one of the stories that they talk about was when he had killed a man and his oxen and so forth, and how he set out to try and to redeem himself. But he was also a person that lived and died, and so. But these are not gods as the Greeks say they were, and so and. As I mentioned, again, it's just basically families and stuff like that that was losing their minds. And Venus also, she was a prostitute that would teach women how to be prostitutes and so forth. And she is now labeled as the goddess of love and so forth. And you could see how that would happen in a time where people were forcing them to worship leaders and so forth. But you see that all this astrology stuff that we know is out there that's based on Greek mythology they're not really gods. They're just people that we have they deified and just have to deal with all of that stuff. The other aspect, we see that Ireland and Scotland and all of those are also sons of Japheth's, families from Japheth that started those things. And you could see that through, I know Jeffrey Keaton is he talks about some of the work in the study, the writings that he has done. You have if you just follow some of these guys' work, and you'll see they talk about Magog, and which is a son of Japheth, which is a son of Noah, and you trace all of that back into the different aspects of the different countries and so forth, and the birth of Ireland. And there's a couple of stories also that I remember reading about how a group of from Ham's descendant that were the first pirates, and then we're going to talk about that when we get to his lineage. But again, my intention is simply just to give you guys a rough basic view. When we get back, we're going to take a break, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pick up in Italy and talk about that part of Europe. And then once we finish with that, then that will be our study, the end of our study. We're going to pick up a little about Russia, and the Bible calls it Magog, Troy, and all those areas. And then once we finish with that, we're going to look into Shem's descendants and continue our study. But we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Mystery Bible. As we continue this journey into the life of Japheth and his descendants, we're now going to take a quick look at Italy and just give you a quick synopsis on the remaining countries that are part of his lineage from his sons. We saw Simba, the grandson of Tubal. He was the one that settled in Italy, and he founded the Roman Empire, basically, and the beginning of the Roman Empire, as I mentioned. So these families, again, the world was populated by these three boys and their sons and grandsons and descendants, as we're taking a look at each and every one of them. And we have looked at quite a few so far. We talked about Greece, and that their gods are basically men and women. We mentioned a little about Zeus, mentioned a little about Hercules being a son, one of the son of Zeus. We talked about who Zeus was, and that his father and his brother had made a pact, and based on that pact, that Zeus's mom left and went and hid, and he was given birth, and the king, he was brought up by a king, and we went through all of that part of it. But as we look at Italy, as I mentioned, Tubal, the grandson, his grandson was Sambinia, and he was the gentleman that founded Italy and Rome. And all of this stuff that was happening at the time, that was happening here, Abraham was born, and parts of his life was going on at the same time. All of this stuff was happening around the world. And most of this history that we're talking about is before the Tower of Babel incident. And so the Tower of Babel hadn't occurred as yet. This was just the repopulating of the earth. You can find a lot of this information in the book of Jasher, and it brings you even all the way up to these Roman empires and so forth, the beginning of Roman empires into Africa and all of this. And so we have to remember that all this action stuff that I'm mentioning to you, and the birth of these nations, if you will, that this was happening before the Tower of Babel. And we see that the tribes, all these tribes of Africans and part, as I mentioned to you earlier, before I forgot, that it was one of the Hamite family group that was the first, became the first pirates. There was a curse that was placed upon them by Noah, and based on that curse, they felt that they were not going to have land and all of that stuff, and as a part of that, they went to the seas, and when Noah actually placed the curse on Canaan, that they went to the seas, that they would have no land, and so they toured the Mediterranean seas, and they were known as the first pirates. They call them the plagues of the coastal sea. So I just wanted to give you a brief information about that. But as we continue and we talk about these guys, Magog and is also a son of Japheth, as you know, and I mentioned to you that he went into Russia, and that's where most of his lineage and how they developed Russia. He actually he had a son, Boat was his name, and he gave his kingdom to his son, and Phineas was his son. Now, Phineas is a great story about him. Is that he had opened up one of the first school of science. They said, as I read in my studies, and that he had this school with students, and this was before, as I mentioned, the fall of the Tower of Babel, and his students would study and learn how to different language, as far as not different language. He just had a school about science, and they were learning about the science of the world and so forth. And so when after the fall in the Tower of Babel, when he had the languages split up, he actually sent his students to all these different locations to learn the language that was spoken to or introduced by God when he came to interrupt the building of the Tower of Babel. And from that language, they believe that the original language was and is the Hebrew language, and all the other languages were outside of the original language. And so it is believed that everyone at that time spoke Hebrew, and as a result of the disobedience, that God had to come down and take a look, he caused the different language to came on, and Eber, they believe, was the gentleman that refused to be a part of the Tower of Babel, and he had moved from that area, and he being the Jew or Hebrew, that he left with that Hebrew language. He wasn't a Jew at the time, but it is believed that the Hebrew language is the original language that man spoke, and all the others were as a result of the sins of man at the Tower of Babel. So I just wanted to give you that background. But if you take a look again and you study, you see Italy, you'll see there's an incident that happened in Italy. It's called the Rape of the Sabines, and you need to go in and take a look at that story. It's about how these men kidnap women and impregnate them so that the tribe would not attack them and so forth. And it's interesting reading when you see that all of these people are one. Russia, as I mentioned to you, Magog, and was the son who was the son of Japheth. He was the one that started that, and his son Boat, and then Phineas, and so forth. The book of Jasher, as I said to you, gives you a lot of information as to some of the history of all of these different men and their Hebrew language and their origination. As we continue to take a look, I know the Bible talks about, as I'm mentioning some of these names, Gog and Magog and all this type of stuff, it reminds me of this scripture about the end of days, actually, the prophecy that was spoken of in Ezekiel about Gog and Magog coming against Israel in the last days. And it talks about the Gog, the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, and Meshach, and Tubal, and all of these things, and how they're coming, which these countries today exist. They're just different names, Persia, Ethiopia, and stuff like that. We know that parts of Iran, Sudan, all of those places, Libya, Germany, these are all countries that are going to be coming against Israel. The house of Tamagar, he also, which is Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, all of these countries, the Bible says that are going to be coming against Israel in the last days to the Battle of Armageddon. So which at some point we're going to get to that as well. But the whole thing is what I'm trying to tell you guys. There's books out there, the book of Joshua, one of the books that they felt that it was necessary to take away from us at the Nicene Council, which is absolutely, and I'm going to teach you about that one day, the birth of Western Christianity and how we lost our power at that after that meeting, and the real reasons behind the Constantine becoming saved and all of that different things that we're going to talk about, because it was, as I believe, the birth of the Western world as far as our religion and politics marrying together, and we still have that union today, and we see it every day in played out in our political arena, where the church and the politicians work together to accomplish and to control the people. So, but I'm going to have that conversation at another day. Troy also is the Battle of Troy. I remember studying Troy in school, and that also is just families fighting with each other. Descendants of Magog, which conquered Greece and so forth. All of these men and their grandchildren, and we saw how they introduced the worship of other gods within the Greek population, and how they claim these men were gods, which we saw that they are not. The book of Joshua talks about all the different kings that first conquered all parts of Africa and all these other places that we're going to take a look at. But my goal with this particular podcast within the lineage is, just as I've mentioned many times, just to show you that we are one people, and that our languages changed at an incident that took place many years ago, but that we came from the same seed. And I think if we begin to look at each other from that point of view, I believe that we will be able to be a little more tolerant of each other, and understand that the DNA that runs through each and every one of us is from the same family. And so my hope is that we would get to that place, basically to respect each other. And you and I may not agree on anything, but we are of the same family, we are of the same blood. And I think we ought to be able to give each other the room to have a conversation with each other, so that we can best understand each other. But what we'll do is we've come to the end of this podcast right now with the lineage of Japheth, and I will continue to enlighten ourselves and to give you some information about the other two brothers, so that we can see what happened. But I suggest that you take a reading of the book of Joshua. I've mentioned all these different books that you can go and take a look at. There are lots of historical stuff that is still out there that can prove the chronology and the connection of Joshua and his children in Europe, as well as Shem in Asia, and also Ham in Africa. And to this, as I mentioned, I've mentioned several other writers that you can go to their source history, because these guys put together some beautiful work. I've read many of them, and I suggest that you take a look at them. I know Amazon has them. I mentioned to you quite a few of them in the last episode. So if you can go back to that and listen to them and grab their stuff, because it will help you to understand what's going on in the world today and why we behave the way we do, and that actually we are all family, and there's no crazier thing than brothers and sisters fighting. It gets really, really violent, and it's hard for people to break up that fight. And so you see that today in the world. But again, I want to thank you for coming and being a part of my podcast. And I hope that you will invite people and that you will come and learn, and so that we can get a better understanding of God's plan for each and every one of us, and to finally see our place, and so that you and I will become effective for God. Thank you for listening to Mystery Bible. Let's walk through the Bible and learn of God and His beautiful mercies and all that He has provided for us, that we may become effective for His kingdom and change this world. Check in every week for a new episode. Search for Mystery Bible on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Breaker, Outcasts, Radio Public, and many more.